dungeon crawlers.
We would be honored if you would join.
All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Dungeon Crawlers, where pack your bags, grab your unicorn, throw on your magical cloak of invisibility, because I'm going to hand the reins over to Krebs. And we're going to talk about your favorite RPGs or your game mechanics. Who knows where this magical ride is going to go, because only the unicorn truly knows.
Thank you so much, Dan. Yeah, it's a great intro. You did a great job there. You know, over the years, I've been playing tabletop RPGs for going on 30 years now. And I have been very fortunate that I've been able to experience like a multitude of systems, and maybe not, definitely not as many as Alton has experienced, I'm sure. Probably not as many as you've experienced, Dan, but I have still experienced a multiplicity of systems. And with every system, I have found things that I really liked and things that I was not so fond of. I would play one system and say, oh man, I wish I had this mechanic from this other game, and vice versa. It happens all the time. It's as if the perfect system might not exist. But then again, maybe it does. It's definitely a taste thing, right? But tonight I wanted to talk about the systems that we love. And I want us to focus first and foremost on our absolute number one favorite RPG system. And I want you to consider about 2 or 3 things that you love about that system, and 1 or 2 things that you're not really happy with, that you wish they would fix or change in some way. Or maybe it changed from the way it used to be and the change is not so good. Something that you think could be improved. Now, Alton, you undoubtedly have the most exposure to tabletop systems out of all 3 of us. Is there a system that you could definitively say is your absolute number one favorite? If you had to sit down and play a tabletop RPG, that's the system. And I'll let you answer that in just a second. I'm happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish, but I also want to make sure that we're clear about this. We are talking about the system, not the setting. So let's talk about like the mechanics, which I know, Alton, I know you know the difference, but I want to make it clear for our listeners. I want to make it clear for myself to make sure that we stay on topic. So Alton, is there a system that you would mark as your number one favorite tabletop RPG system?
So here's the thing about that. Okay. And I know that, first off, no matter what I say, someone out there is going to get upset that I chose whatever thing over whatever other thing. And that's okay, right? Everybody has reasons that they like their individual systems. And for me, my personal favorite system is also one that I know a lot of people are probably going to disagree with for various reasons. But I also understand that the reason that I love this system so much is partially because it was the system that I learned to play the game in. It's also the system that I have the most experience with, but also as somebody who loves customizability and crunchy mechanics and understanding the mathematics and interweaving of games more than anything else, Pathfinder First Edition is still my favorite system to date. Not because I believe that it is a perfect system. I have ported so many things into Pathfinder from other systems when I run it for people to help the experience really be excellent. But as one of the systems that was mechanically based on a 3.5 open game license that took a lot of the things that made D&D 3.5 great, did not fix all of them, but fixed some of them and balanced other things into good space. It really captured a lot of the essence of a good, crunchy, dungeon crawly, get in and build a character. And every level I'm looking forward to leveling up because I'm going to get something cool. And if I have a plan from the beginning, then by the time that I get to level 10, I'm doing really cool stuff because I've gone down this path. And on the opposite side of that coin, every time that I sit down at tables with players who are far more experienced than I am, who understand the system and have read every page that I admittedly have not, inevitably, whether it's as a player or as a GM, somebody's going to bring something to the table that I've never seen before, and I'm going to have to learn that cool new thing. Again, not a perfect system, but for me, it is one that I hold in great esteem.
Excellent. Awesome. And so what I heard you say in there is that you like the system for its flexibility, its injectability, or as we software developers would say, extensibility. But you like that you can expand upon it with mechanics that you like from other sources that you can inject into the game. Also, it sounds like it's relatively accessible and simple in terms of like learning how to create a character. And when you level up, you get consistent and meaningful rewards. Is all of that pretty accurate?
Yeah, pretty accurate. I mean, for anybody who hasn't played 3.5 or Pathfinder, it is considerably crunchier than 5th edition.
Now, can you define the term crunchier for our listeners?
Yeah, so when we're talking about crunchiness within an RPG, we're talking about mechanical complexity, but also mathematical complexity, right? There's a lot of content and it all interacts with itself in very, very interesting ways. In order to really min-max a character, right? Figuring out the best possible way to do the thing that you want to do, there is some knowledge intensity. And inevitably, as more content gets created, there have consistently been things that have accidentally become busted or that have dramatically changed the landscape of what was possible before. For players who really love to build characters, not just in terms of backstory, but in terms of mechanical bits. What can I do with my character? Crunchier RPGs often tend to be more satisfying for those people, because even though the story is fun, being able to explore the story through the lens of what are sometimes perceived to be back-breaking mechanics or game-breaking mechanics is a lot more fun. As an excellent example, I actually have the great privilege of being a player right now in a campaign that's been going for over a year and a half at this point.
Nice.
It's been fantastic. I play every other Saturday night for a few hours and have been having a great time with it. But I'm playing this barbarian, and I sat down from the beginning and I said, okay, I am aiming for what I want to do by level 10. What I want to do by level 10 is I want to have as many attacks of opportunity as possible, meaning if anybody moves through my space or tries to do something that would distract me from whatever I'm doing, I get to try to hit them. Normally in Pathfinder, you're limited to 1 per round, which means even if I have multiple people moving through my space, I only get to hit 1 of them. But I said, I'm going to just get as many as I can. And the other thing that I wanted to do at level 10 was take advantage of a little mechanic from 3.0 and 3.5 and Pathfinder called Cleave, in which if I take a full round attack action, meaning that all I'm doing this round is attacking, if I successfully hit somebody and am within range of somebody else that I can also hit, I can keep hitting until I miss or until there is nobody that I haven't hit yet. And so I just wanted to be this kind of tanky crowd control, get in and do what I want to do guy. Now that I'm finally at level 9, which I know that sounds like absurd for having played for a year and a half, but that's kind of how it is sometimes when you're actually playing long form campaigns. The other night we got into this battle and maybe 6 months ago, 8 months ago, I had a situation in which my character ended up being mind controlled. And so I decided to pick up some additional defensive capabilities and things like that. We get into this fight. We have these succubi that transform in front of us, and they're all sitting around this pool of water that, you know, player knowledge we know is dangerous. Characters, obviously, we would have no clue. But the succubus tries to seduce me and mind control me And when that fails, she tries to grapple me. Well, I'm a big beefy barbarian. She couldn't use the spell that she thought she could against me because I had spell resistance. So she failed a check, wasn't able to get me. Then she tried to grapple me, and I had an ability that allowed me to immediately counter grapple her. So all of a sudden now I'm holding her down.
And she's like, my seduction ploy worked.
Yeah, exactly. Except, I'm crushing her windpipe. And so she can't cast spells.
Don't shame other people's kink. It's fine. Keep going.
It's fair. And then the other succubi that are around the edge of this pool all start trying to take shots at me. But I have this war paint that lets me have the effects of blur. So 20% of the time, their attacks just miss. And so I'm just sitting there, and the GM is sitting there like, well, I mean, this is supposed to be a lot harder than it looks like you're making it. I'm like, yeah, that's how it is. And we get through that encounter fairly quickly. We move on to the next room, and it's the big bad evil guy who happens to be this copper dragon. And one of the guys casts fly on me, so I'm able to fly up after him. I start hitting him at melee range, and this guy gets 7 attacks. He's dealing like 100 damage a round.
Oh.
But because I am blurring and I have some damage resistance and all these other things, and anytime that he tries to cast a spell or move out of my range, I can chase after him, and I have 7 attacks of opportunity if it's on a single target. Like, it again, that type of crazy epic level crunch that you can do if you know that it's there.
That's your new nickname.
Fun for me.
That's your new nickname. Your new nickname is Captain Crunch.
Captain Crunch.
Yeah, because you absolutely owned that system, and the system's designed so that you can do min-max like that. Like, you can actually plan out the strategy and the strength of your character.
Now, the min to that character is that I have straight 7s in intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Right?
Don't we all?
My only job is to get in and deal damage, and then the moment that there's anything else going on, I'm dumb as a brick. One of the things that I'm playing from a role-playing perspective is anytime we walk into a room that we haven't been in before, I'm now looking for secret doors, because one time we were in a room and the rogue found a secret door and he couldn't get it open, but I was able to bash it down. So now I'll just randomly hit walls to see if I can bash down a secret door. Right. And that's kind of crazy, fun nonsense. But that kind of, again, the word for it is crunch, that texture, that mechanical complexity, where I know that there are things about my character that are not optimized because I don't know about them, or because I made some other choice early on because I wanted to do this specific thing that in most circumstances is not great. But when it matters, I get to be the guy that whirling dervishes through the entire horde of zombies. That feels really fun to me.
Absolutely. So Dan,
yeah,
you have also experienced a bevy of systems over the years. You've had some amazing blog-worthy, podcast-worthy experiences. Can you definitively state an RPG system that you would consider your number one favorite?
I mean, to be honest, that's like saying, hey, which one of your kids is your favorite?
Yeah, so which one? I mean, that's easy. Let's go.
Yeah, it's or like it's not an easy one to pick. I mean, there's the go-to game system that you say it, everyone has played it, everyone has done. That's Dungeons and Dragons.
Of course,
we do. We know that. My favorites, though, tend to be the ones that are more challenging, other than just the random dungeon crawl, crash and bash. If I have to pick one, I would have to say the Savage World system, RPG system. I really like that, and the reason I like that is because it's so flexible in their system that you have different types. You can pretty much have any game flavor you want. You want to play a Western, grab Deadlands. You want to play some alien world that's based off of an old 1980s video game, play Thunderscape, Savage Worlds Thunderscape. I mean, even Larry Correa, who we're going to have on the show in a couple weeks,
we are.
his Monster Hunter International book series has an RPG that is based on the Savage Worlds mechanics. It's not very hard, but it's complicated enough that it's entertaining. It allows you to create the type of characters you want. It allows for great game mechanics, for amazing game moments where you guys will be talking about those moments for years to come, as well as enough. The game components give enough for you can screw up and you're going to talk about those moments for years to come. I really enjoy the game for that, and the storytelling capability. I think for me, I think that's Alton loves the number crunching. He loves the mechanics. I love the storytelling aspect of RPGs. So I think, that's why I love this one so much. It allows for storytelling. It allows for that ability for the players to be able to use storytelling to expand and grow their characters. And I know Alton has a rebuttal already. I can see it.
Well, no, not a rebuttal, but just a question, because I think that you struck on something that hadn't actually occurred to me as Krebs asked the original question.
Oh, okay.
Which is for you, Savage Worlds, right? You're saying that you love it because you love the storytelling aspect. Do you prefer Savage Worlds as a player, as a GM, or both for that reason? Because for me, I was coming from the aspect of as a player.
Yeah, I mean, I love it for both, really. As a player, because we have these unique system settings, I can play a dusty gunslinger that is down on his luck, that the only thing he trusts in the world is the 6-shooter on his hip and his trusty dog that he just found as a pup in a car, in a wooden box at some rail depot, and he was dying, and somehow that dog gave him the will to live, and now he's hunting down the people that shot him and almost killed him. I mean, stuff like that makes it fun. I just threw that together in seconds, but the mechanics of that game system allow for that. At the same time, you can easily run a game where you're this archaeologist that has stumbled upon this religious item, and you're running away from Nazis to try to keep this religious item.
Dang it, Dan! It belongs in a museum.
Exactly. That's why I love the mechanics of that. You can easily incorporate movies that you love. You can bring in story, whether you're the GM developing a great adventure or the player itself coming up with a really cool backstory for your character that plays into the story that you're running or playing in.
Awesome. And you know what? That makes me want to ask you, Alton, do you have a different answer based on whether you're a GM or a player as to which system is your favorite?
So, funnily enough, as a GM, it depends on the audience that I'm playing with. If I'm playing with a whole bunch of people that are learning RPGs for the first time, that still want a little bit of crunchiness, but nothing super crazy in depth, I like 5th edition. But that's also partially because of the bevy of free tools that are available to assist new players and its ubiquitousness, right? The fact that you can walk into any game store in the world, go onto Reddit very easily and find answers, get help.
You can find core books at Target, for heaven's sake.
Yeah. And so if I'm helping players who really want to get into RPGs because they know they love RPGs, they know they're going to love RPGs, that's usually what I will use. I still do run Pathfinder and love running Pathfinder for experienced players. I've had great games, in fact, where I've been able to say, if it exists in 3.5 or Pathfinder, you can use it, right? Whatever tools, whatever books are at your disposal, because there's so much cross compatibility. There's so many things that are open there. One of the other ones that I really, really love from a storytelling aspect that I've stolen a lot of tools from is Edge of the Empire, which we will play at some point.
I really want to. I almost bought the core book like 5 times.
So to be fair, I own the books, but I've never played it.
To be fair, I am none of those things.
And it's really sad considering I am a huge Star Wars nut, that I have yet to play that game.
So with Edge of the Empire, it utilizes the core Genesis mechanics that were developed by Fantasy Flight Games, in which you can succeed at something with negative effects, or fail at something with positive effects, or succeed with positive or fail with negative. And there are very rarely kind of middle of the road, nothing happens situations. Especially in the context of being able to use the Force, or divine intervention, if you're working in a fantasy, being able to have those types of tools at my disposal as a DM is really nice. And the way that they treat character creation led to the development of the motivation, obligation, core belief clock system that we've talked about before.
Nice.
And then obviously I'm very partial to Dimensions, my pet project, for people who don't know whether they would like an RPG or not and want to try. But that's a tale for another time.
Coming summer 2020X.
20XX, maybe 2XXX.
But I do agree. Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is easy if you want to throw together a game, an adventure, or whatever for people that have never played before. It's like, hey, let's run an adventure. This is what it's like. Go. Or I have these prefab characters, or we can go through the process of creating characters. It's really simple, easy. The tools are there, and they don't really have to struggle a lot through it.
And if any of you are not using D&D Beyond, try it. They have all of the core rules available for free, especially if you're just getting into RPGs and you don't know how to manage a character sheet yet. Fantastic. As a GM, DM, and a game store owner, if I'm running 5e for people, I have a paid account so that people can access all of my books. And that makes the whole game run so much more smoothly because I can see everybody in one spot, see what they're seeing, and answer their questions with direct references to the books that they need to look at.
That's amazing. Yeah, the online and otherwise digital tooling that has come out for D&D over the years, specifically for 5th edition, are extremely impressive. And that is coming from a guy who has worked on 2 personal projects, one for Palladium, one for RPGs in general, that I was soloing those projects for educational experience, but also because I wanted those things to be real. It is not a trivial problem to create digital tools that are meaningful and valuable to a given RPG system, because RPG games, by their very nature, tend to depend upon the human ability to be abstract. I want to give you this concept. I'm going to give you these guidelines. I'm going to give you this rule for this, but you're the adjudicator. And yes, it's normally like this 95% of the time, but then 2% of the time it's this, and 0.7% of the time it's that, and 3% of the time it's this, but now we're over 100%. So we're going to have to back off. You know, it's very interesting. It's very interesting how RPGs are designed that way.
Yeah, and graphical interfaces as well, being able to present all of that information in a way that is intuitive and easy to navigate. Like, yes. One of the greatest things that came out of 2nd edition and especially 3rd edition was a standardized character sheet that was easy to navigate.
Yes.
But being able to replicate that digitally, right? Like when you have pen and paper, when you're dealing with physical media, there are things that are easier for a player to do. When you're working with a digital medium, it's completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you're presenting the same information, the way that you interact with your phone versus a notebook is very, very different. And you have to account for that.
Absolutely.
Anyway, yes, I'm not trying to take away from your point, but rather punctuate it and agree with it. It is a huge undertaking.
Absolutely. And for me, in terms of the favorite system, and I know this comes as no surprise, but it's Kroll. No, I'm just joking. It's Palladium. Palladium is how I got introduced to Dan in the first place. We saw each other at what was then SLC Nerd, if I remember correctly. We were playing a game that was Palladium based. Dan noticed it and he said, "Hey, I've been I wanted to get someone on the show to talk about this system, and you guys are playing. Why don't you come on? And so my game group at the time, we came on as like an enclave of guests, and heaven help us all. Now I'm a co-host on the show, but Palladium, that is a system that I have been playing since the early 90s. It's not my first system that I ever experienced. I experienced multiple systems before that. This is my favorite system. And what I like about this system is it is a fairly, first of all, the system is universal enough in its design that it supports a fantasy system to compete with D&D. There is a modern zombie system, a modern zombie apocalypse game. It has a superhero and a super villain IP is what I'm looking for, like game series. They have rifts, which I lovingly and jokingly refer to as the every game because it has a little bit of everything in it. That's sort of the point. Like rifts is their flagship game on this system, and it represents what the system can be. It can be anything. It has strengths in the sense that you can get really crunchy with it, and you can create characters that have very specific strengths, very specific abilities, very specific opportunities to be heroes or villains accordingly. It's a game that knows itself really well in the sense that it understands the vast majority of human nature. It makes the argument, and just like you were saying earlier, Alton, I know what I'm about to say next is probably going to ruffle some feathers, but for me, I consider this a positive. This is just a personal opinion, everybody. But when it comes to alignment, it takes the stance that no one can be neutral, that there's no concept of neutrality. You're going to have an opinion one way or the other. You won't. Even if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. Thank you, Rush. And the idea is that you're either going to be super duper duper good. You're going to be a little good with some selfishness. You're going to be a little evil with some chaoticness, or you're going to be straight up evil, right? There's no concept of just sort of riding the middle rail and finding your moral neutrality. So no moral Al Gores out there. The other thing, go ahead.
I was just going to expand on that thought with neutrality. It's a big problem that I have with players too, because even when they're like, well, I'm trying to not take a side on this, as soon as I ask the question, why? Then all of a sudden the neutral isn't so neutral anymore, because they say, well, it's bad to take away life from other people. I'm like, well, then that's a good motivation, even though you're doing a neutral action, right? Like, yeah, there's all kinds of, I agree.
Or the perfunctory notion that if you do something, let's say selfish or even evil in the heat of the moment, you must find some alternate action to balance it out, and vice versa. If you give someone some bread, you have to like rob food from someone by knife point to balance it out. I just don't think that's realistic, and it's never been an alignment that has ever appealed to me. Now there are people out there who love playing neutral characters because they love the mind game that goes with that, and I'm not going to yuck your yum. I am perfectly fine with you enjoying that aspect. What I'm saying, and I think Alton's on this train with me, is that I don't believe that neutrality in an alignment is a realistic expectation, nor does it lead to a realistic or believable or vulnerable character.
It just makes me think of the line from Futurama, how very neutral of you. I don't know if anybody's seen, have you guys seen that episode? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So I love Palladium for its combat system. I love its core character creation. There are some things I don't like about character creation with Palladium, but its core, its basics, there's a lot about character creation there that I really like. And I love the diversity of outcomes expressed by the system being as flexible and, dare I say, universal as it is. Dan, what were you going to say? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, you're fine. It was great you finished that out. I think that's probably the reason why we like some of these other systems is the alignment issue. That is something I've always really struggled with. It's like characters and people are diverse. We're not completely lawful good. We're not completely evil. We're not completely neutral. We just kind of blend in and out depending on the situation. You know, there are some situations where maybe, yeah, we are a little chaotic evil in what we've done. You know, there's probably moments where we decide, hey, I'm going to go egg my band teacher's house, and then it freezes that night and it's all frozen all over the house. That could probably be considered chaotic evil. I don't know. But I always struggled with that, especially when you have people like, okay, I'm true neutral, which means I can't take a side. I'm sorry, that's just not life, you know? And there are times where I've had players that are like, I'm true neutral. I'm like, really? Were you true neutral with those goblins you just slaughtered?
Yeah.
Because if you were true neutral, you would have said, hey, whoa, we're invading their home, their cave. We should leave. We shouldn't get in the middle of this dispute with the king whose daughter has been kidnapped because maybe she ran off with the other guy because she's in love with him. I mean, just we don't get in conflicts. You know, I'm just here to collect a paycheck and do nothing.
And even stepping away from neutrality, every single one of us knows somebody who we would consider to be uncharacteristically kind and considerate. But if you ask that person the moments in their life that they regret, I guarantee you they're going to bring up the moments where they snapped at their kids or they had a selfish, mean thought that they acted upon, right? And it's like that's part of life. Yes. And so, but that doesn't mean that you would characterize that person as a bad person.
No.
Situations happen.
Yeah. And I think if we could get rid of the alignment system in D&D, I think that would be fantastic. Yes, you could probably say that person is evil because he's going out and slaughtering people. But that is that character's perspective upon that person has nothing to do. That person may think he is actually a good guy because he's doing something to save his kingdom.
Every villain thinks they're the hero.
Yes.
And every hero is someone else's villain, right? Yep. All right. So, and by the way, I'm really glad that we kind of hit this oil well of topic matter because I think this should be a future episode where we discuss the alignment system, what we like about it, what we don't like about it, maybe even hit a couple of other common system tropes. And we can talk about what we think is realistic and not, and including things like, as a GM, is there ever a time where a character could behave against their alignment but still be in character? Don't answer that now. That should be a future episode. So those are the things, those are the systems that we like. And by the way, Dan, thank you so much for bringing up Savage Worlds. Fun fact for those of you out there who might not know, Savage Worlds teamed up with Palladium and made a Savage Worlds system version of Rifts. It's actually Rifts Savage Worlds, if I remember correctly. Yep. And so you should absolutely, if you prefer a hyper simplified but still super fun system, great for storytelling, then the Savage Worlds system is a great place to go if you want to try the Rifts world, the Rifts context. And if you're more of a crunchy player, or if you want to dive into the details, then going to the original Palladium system is probably the way to go. And of course, as always, D&D is a traditional place to cut your teeth because it is a well-tested, well-evolved system. So those are the things, those are the systems that we love. And we've talked about what we love about those systems, but I would argue, maybe argue is not the right term. I have never experienced the perfect system. With every system, there's always some gap. There's always some element that I don't enjoy as a player or as a GM. Every system has some vulnerability. Oh man, it's almost like the real world is filled with strengths and weaknesses simultaneously. So for all the munchkins out there who know what I'm talking about or hate what I'm talking about. So Dan, let's go over to you first.
Sure.
Is there any mechanic? Is there any systemic aspect of Savage Worlds that you're not a big fan of?
I mean, you're right. Every game system has its issues. Every game system has a flaw or maybe something that just doesn't work right. I mean, we just gabbed about one just a second ago. You know, the alignment thing with D&D and that. For me, with Savage Worlds. I mean, there are some of the mechanics that sometimes feel a little clunky. Like you said, if you're looking for a mechanics heavy game system, this isn't for you. It's more storytelling. So that would be kind of a fault to it if that's the type of game system you're looking for. Like Iron Kingdoms, man, that thing is mechanics driven, and I love it. I really love that game system too. But when you look to if you're going from that to Savage Worlds, you're going to be disappointed. You're definitely going to be disappointed if that's what you love, those game mechanics. It's kind of like with Palladium. If you're playing Palladium and that's what you love, and you go to Savage Worlds, you're going to be like, whoa, something's wrong here. Something's missing. But and it's great that they made the simplified version of Rifts, so they could appeal to those people that want to play Rifts but don't want to play the heavy mechanics.
Yeah.
So that kind of lends itself to both a positive and a negative, in my opinion, because it just depends on, like Alton said, your audience. If you have guys that love playing mechanics heavy games, that just love to grind and chomp away at that, this isn't going to be for them. But if you have a group of people, guys, gals, whatever, that love storytelling, that love to be able to weave that wonderful story, this is going to be for you. It's going to be that. And there are times where I want to create that type of game with mechanics, and I just can't do it with that game system. I have to go to another game system to make that happen for that group. Because really it's their game. I mean, you're just the conduit to provide a fun experience for them, and it's them that it's about. So if I want to run a game, I have to adjust it to my players.
And that's the way it ought to be. We've talked about that before, where the GM is just facilitating the player's story.
Yeah.
So I definitely hear what you're saying, though. If you have a group of players who enjoy the crunchiness or who enjoy specificity of systematic mechanics, then Savage Worlds is going to leave them a little underwhelmed, because Savage Worlds prides itself on being low system, high context, as it were, right? So yeah, I can totally see that. Alton, for D&D, and I'd like to focus on 5th edition. I mean, it would be really easy for us to burn 4th edition to the ground. It would be really easy for us to laud 3 and 3.5 to the heavens. But yeah, 5th edition, what don't you like about, or is there anything that you don't like about it?
Can I actually change to talk about Pathfinder?
Oh, excuse me. You did say Pathfinder before, and I switched it in my mind. I'm sorry. You did say Pathfinder before. So yeah, Pathfinder, go.
So there is a glaring problem that exists in Pathfinder that is part of what motivated me to begin to design my own mechanics and to explore other systems. And it's a problem that I still am wrestling with. No puns. Okay, maybe some puns intended to this day. But it is what I group collectively as control mechanics. The two biggest examples of this are the grapple mechanic in Pathfinder and mind control, which is a problem that most RPGs just cannot handle. So this is where crunch can go very wrong, and or where not having enough mechanical support can make things extremely unenjoyable for you and your players and the other people at the table and anybody watching your live cast, etc., etc. People on the internet have literally had to put together a flow chart to be able to keep track of what you are able to do and what needs to happen when you try to grapple someone or someone tries to grapple you. It is egregiously crunchy after having a very beautiful underlying mechanic in Pathfinder you have what are called combat maneuvers, right? And grapple is a combat maneuver. You have two different numbers. One is a combat maneuver bonus, which is saying if I am trying to do something to you, this is how much I get to add to my D20. And you also have a combat maneuver defense, which is just a static number that is how difficult is it to do physical things to me, besides just regular hits. I'm talking about physically, I am trying to drag you to the edge of the cliff and throw you off. How hard is it for me to do that to you? Your CMD is what I have to beat with a die roll plus my CMB, which is really cool. But then they're like, but if you're grappling somebody, well, there's a lot more complexity here that we need to address. And all of a sudden, it explodes into this huge web of complications. Even after playing this system for 12 years at this point, I still have to pull up the grapple flow chart every single time. And I've been playing a barbarian for a year and a half now. This is one of the things that I do. And I have to pull it up and I have to explain it to the GM and I have to explain it to the other players at the table, and we have to bicker about what works and what doesn't. And then everybody turns their heads to me because I'm the barbarian and I have to go through the flow chart and say, this is what happens. It's absurd. On the opposite side, mind control is a simple one-off check. And then all of a sudden you're either completely compelled or they cannot make another check against you, which is absolutely absurd to me. First off, magic is nebulous and complex and crazy, and there's probably should be some degrees of various levels of control there. But second off, if you have to build a flowchart to explain me wrestling another guy, why in the world is my mind somehow considerably less complex? And it's not fun as a player, especially because as a barbarian who has to sit there and figure out how to grapple the magic user for 20 minutes, when it finally becomes their turn and they say, I mind control you, you just lose. And then they mind control you. And that feels really, really, really bad.
Yeah.
It's a problem that I've addressed in many of my own games. As I've been designing my D&D equivalent system, I have things that help to find a nice middle ground on both of these. But that's really the biggest rock that if I could just crush it without having to use a flowchart, believe me, I would.
I totally hear that. In fact, that actually kind of segues nicely into what I don't like about Palladium. And there's one thing for sure that I still am not a huge fan of, and there's even sort of like a dishonorable mention. But one of the things that turns people off from Palladium, and I've talked to many people over the years about this, is the complexity of character creation. Earlier, I said that the core of character creation is something that I enjoy, and it's something that I like a lot. But that's like talking, when I say core, I'm talking about attributes, what they represent, what bonuses you get, and how to determine the values of those attributes. Giving your character a name, choosing an alignment, your starting health, that sort of stuff is pretty direct and is not particularly complex. The moment you get outside of the core of your character, when you start getting especially to the unfortunately dreaded skill system in Palladium, skills are one of those things that really frustrate newer people when it comes to Palladium. And let me summarize it like this. If you are a brand new player to the game and you're sitting down with your GM or another person who has experience making characters in Palladium, the average time it takes for a new player to make a new character with help is about an hour and a half. If you're making the character on your own and you don't have experience, it's closer to about 3 hours. 3 hours to make a character for the first time. And that is enough to drive anybody away from an otherwise excellent system. So that's something that when they made Rift Savage Worlds, that was something that really benefited the Rift's world, was to have a much simpler character creation process, for sure. Go ahead.
I was going to throw an honorable mention out there. If you want a game that's really quick, that you can whip up a character in about 2-3 minutes, XDM. Try that game out.
I don't know
really
that one.
Simple, huh?
I don't know that one.
It's written by Tracy and Curtis Hickman. It's a really simple, easy to go, really light-hearted game system. It's really based on storytelling. I think you have 3 stats that you go off of to roll. It's really simple.
Psych, tech, and wah.
Yeah, my I believe there's only one adventure on it, and that adventure you start hanging over a pit of lava, and the goal is to get back to the tavern to have drinks at the very end. Because most adventures start at a tavern.
Yeah.
So it's really simple and easy. It's a great one if you just want a couple stats. You make your character, give them a name, and you go.
Awesome. And my dishonorable mention for Palladium, I love the combat system because it's so freeform and open. But what that means is that more experienced players can manipulate and get more out of that system than less experienced players who are just kind of like, I punched the guy. Because saying I punched the guy, there's a lot that's implied, sure, but it's like, okay, cool. So how are you standing? Where are they in orientation to you? Because Palladium is not typically played on like a battle mat, for example, although you could. And then it's like, okay, you're going for the face, you're going for the gut, there's all sorts of detail that can flesh out the combat scenario, and the GM can conduct it as complex or as simply as they desire. But that sort of, once you start rolling dice, it becomes, well, there's D20 and it's this kind of attack, and then here's my skill for this kind of a weapon, and then here's my level in my martial art, and it becomes a lot more convoluted if you're not careful. Again, I put most of the onus on the GMs there, but it's one of those things where I think the system could stand to be simplified a little bit, but I don't want to lose the robustness of that combat system. The robustness and the flexibility, the dynamicism is one of the things I love about it. And so if the price to have that dynamicism is that we have to have some abstract complexity inherent in the combat system, then okay, I'll take that. Okay, well, we're up against the end of the show here. I'm going to toss it over to Alton. Alton, let's do a really quick lightning round, and you are one of the best people at crafting like really clever, thought-provoking questions, and I'm really good at creating artificial pressure. So here we go, lightning round. Alton, ask a question. Go.
Okay, friends. So for a lightning round question tonight, I want you to think of the top 3 words to describe your ideal RPG, whether it's the one that you've already played or the one that you're waiting to play. What are the top 3 words that describe your ideal RPG? For me, the first is progression. I want to be able to see characters evolve. I want to be able to level them up and have it be meaningful. I want to have cool things that I look forward to doing. The second is clarity. I want to be able to understand where I'm going and understand where I need to look to figure out a rule, to figure out what's best for my game as a GM or my character, right, as a player. And then the third for me is emphasis. I want to know what the RPG is about. I want to know what it's focused on, and I want to know what it is that I'm signing up for when I sit down at the table. It's one of the things that I think makes XDM stand out very well. It's unfortunate that it's been sold out for quite some time. You can currently buy a copy on Amazon for $325.
Yikes.
You can get the Kindle version for significantly less. I highly recommend that you at least start there. But those are the 3 big things for me. Mr. Krebs.
I'm going to sound totally plebeian compared to your eloquence, but risk. There has to be pressure on me and the fellow players to stand against. There has to be some obstacle, right? Reward, like you were saying, with growth, with loot, with expansion of skills, with increase in ability. And finally, world. It has to take place. The story, the context has to be something that appeals to me. It has to mean something to me. So those are the things I would choose. My 3 words are risk, reward, and world. Dan.
My 3 words. I guess it boils down just kind of to my personality with me. Storytelling, creative, and challenging. If it's too easy, it doesn't work for me.
True.
It's boring. I have to have a level of creativity. If I'm just building the standard barbarian, the standard mage, whatever, it doesn't work for me. I've talked about my characters. I have some really unique characters I play, like Cookie, the dwarf, that had a battle, he rode a war pig named Bacon and had a war chicken named Eggs, and all of his armor and weapons were cooking utensils that were modified. I like to be creative, and I get to experience that in several different ways in these games. And then, of course, I have to be able to tell a story. If I'm just, I can just jump on a video game and play some random character and run through a maze slaughtering things or a labyrinth. That's easy to do. I want to craft a story that I can sit here and gab with you guys on the podcast or with other people at game stores or talk about them on panels, because through that storytelling, that gives us stories to tell later on with other people or with our kids or whatever that, you can talk about and have a good laugh. R.A. Salvatore still talks about his Wubba Wubba story, which is fantastic and hilarious. If you don't know that story, look it up on, search up R.A. Salvatore Wubba Wubba on YouTube. Someone recorded it. It's hilarious. It's brilliant. It's amazing. I hope to someday have that same experience, but I do have a lot of great stories. So that would be mine.
Awesome.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a wonderful evening. I'm so glad to have been here. And I think, Krebs, unless you have anything else, Dan should probably take us out.
All right. I'll wrap this show up. So remember that there are many, many game systems out there that you can enjoy. And they're not all perfect. We've already told you that. You will find some issues here and there, but realize each of these games are designed to bring you entertainment. They're designed to allow you to have a fun experience at the game table with other people, your friends, maybe even new people. And don't look for ways to exploit and damage the game, but look for ways to use the rules, the mechanics to make the experience better for you and those at the table. And with that said, we're out of here.
And dungeon crawlers, whatever your system is, tell its story, whatever may come.
And as we have always urged you to do, be epic and don't suck.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Dungeon crawlers.